By the time the string quartet found the first notes of our wedding song, my husband's hand was already at another woman's waist, right where mine used to live. I am Hannah Cooper, 42, architect, mother, and the woman who designed homes for strangers while letting someone else redesign the boundaries of my own. I measure my life in plans and elevations, in spans and loads and sightlines. I have always trusted angles and numbers more than promises. Numbers don't lie. Promises do. The ballroom at the Park Meridian was a masterclass in symmetry. Coffered ceilings, a ring of Doric columns, crystal fixtures that broke the light into soft, expensive stars. I'd chosen it for the geometry, if I'm honest, and because its bones reminded me of the first gallery I ever sketched as a student at Columbia. Tonight, the space was dressed in winter whites for our 20th anniversary. Orchids spilling from glass towers, linen like fresh snow, a quartet tucked beneath a plaster arch. And in the exact center of that symmetry, my husband Ethan was breaking it. He spun Chloe Morgan, his 20-something junior associate, into a turn that landed her against his chest. The move was practiced muscle memory. She laughed, a bright, brittle sound, and tipped her chin up as if collecting ceiling light like a blessing. There was a thin gold chain at her throat with a pendant I recognized. A minimalist square, the piece Ethan had pointed out 3 weeks earlier in the window of a shop on Madison. Clean lines. You like that kind of thing, hon? He'd said it with the casual certainty of a man who no longer needed to ask what I liked. Around them, our guests adjusted their expressions like they were trying on masks. Investors from Ethan's firm. 2 of my clients from the Upper West Side brownstone restoration. My best friend Lena from grad school. Even Sophie, our 15-year-old, standing at the edge of the floor in a green dress I'd hemmed the night before, learning in real time what betrayal looks like under chandeliers. "What is Dad doing?" she asked without taking her eyes off the orbiting pair. Her voice was tight, deliberate, the voice she uses to keep from crying. "He's making a mess," I said, surprised by how level I sounded. Maybe because I couldn't let myself feel it yet. If grief is a building, shock is the scaffolding that keeps you from falling off the edge while you work. The quartet drifted into it last because the universe has a sense of humor, and Ethan lowered his mouth to Chloe's ear, saying something that put color in her cheeks. He didn't look at me. But she did, right over his shoulder, lips curving into the smallest satisfied smile. If there's a universal language of triumph, it lives in the corner of the mouth. "Enough," Sophie breathed, and before I could catch her wrist she was moving. She cut across the black and white floor like a note across a score, clean, decisive. The crowd parted for her because children have sacred rights in rooms like these, and she stopped inches from Chloe's stilted heels. "Hey," Sophie said, calm and unmistakable, "that's my father. You can step away now." The music faltered but didn't stop. A cellist missed and found the note again, audible like a flinch. Chloe's brows lifted. "You must be Sophie," she said, voice dipped in syrup. "You're even prettier than your photos." Ethan finally turned to me then, the faraway look on his face sliding into something I knew too well. Damage control. "Hon. Don't," I said, still not moving. If I moved, I would break the symmetry of the room, and I wasn't ready to break anything but the habit of being polite. "You think you've won something?" Sophie asked Chloe, light refracting in her eyes. "Because if you're proud of stealing a man who lies, you might want to raise your standards." A collective inhale. The quartet stopped pretending. Silence settled. Chloe's smile tilted sharp. "Sweetheart, adults are complicated. Your mother and father." "My mother is not the one grinding on a colleague at her own anniversary party," Sophie said, every syllable a scalpel. "And my father isn't complicated. He's careless." Chairs scraped. Phones rose. There are few things more appetizing to wealth than a scandal plated beautifully in public. Chloe's hand came up, fast, instinct, pride. It didn't touch my daughter. I was there before it could, my palm cracking against Chloe's cheek with a sound that made the chandelier tremble. She stumbled, one hand flying to her face, the other catching Ethan's lapel. He smelled like a cologne I didn't buy. "You don't touch my child," I said softly, and it echoed anyway. "Ever." For a second even the light held still. Then sound came back all at once. The scrape of someone's fork, Lena's, "Oh my God," the quartet's violinist whispering "holy," before swallowing the rest. Ethan recovered first. He stepped toward me, palms open like he meant to early Christmas a peace offering. Hannah, we can talk ob. No, I took Sophie's hand. We can't. We walked and the crowd split. Neighbors becoming walls, colleagues becoming corridors, as Sophie and I moved through them toward the doors. I didn't look back, not even when my name landed against my shoulder in Ethan's voice for the 1,000th time in 20 years and last time tonight. In the corridor, the hotel air smelled faintly of lemon and floor wax. It grounded me in a way the ballroom never could. I exhaled and heard it catch like a blade snagging fabric, and only then did I realize my hands were shaking. Sophie saw it too. She squeezed. I'm sorry, she said, because that's what good kids say when they don't know where else to put their rage. You don't apologize for telling the truth, I said. You never apologize for telling the truth. We reached a service stare-eyed clocked when we arrived. Habit. Architects are always in conversation with exits, and I took it down, counting the flights like a prayer. On the second landing, Sophie stopped. Mom, are we leaving him? Her eyes were a map of the last 15 years. Birthday candles, band-aids, first day of kindergarten, braces, algebra, the way she still knocks on my studio door even though she has the right to barge in. Yes, I said, and when I heard myself I knew I wasn't guessing. We are. We didn't go to the valet. I wanted distance, not theater. My shoes were wrong for walking, but I walked anyway, out into the slice of winter that lives between taxis and streetlights. New York breathed around us, steam rising from grates, a siren stitching a far street to this one. It felt like standing on the roof of a building I just finished, looking out at a city that didn't know my name and somehow still belonged to me. Sophie tugged my sleeve. What now? Now, I said, and let the scaffolding creak. We go home. You pack a backpack, clothes, school stuff, your camera. I'll grab what matters. She knew what that meant. There's a ledger in any marriage, and mine had entries in ink. The Whitman house. Our New Jersey colonial with the wraparound porch and the kitchen window that frames the maple in perfect elevation, was mine by deed and blood. My father, Robert Whitman, had left it to me with a note that said, "You design the life you live, kiddo. Don't ever let anyone build over your load-bearing walls." I had laughed when I read it. Tonight I felt the steel. By the time we reached the garage, the tremor in my hands was gone. Decisions are a kind of heat. They move through you and leave you clearer. Before I dive into my story, I want to know, where are you watching from today? And as you listen, let me know in the comments how this story makes you feel, or if you've ever experienced something similar. Your thoughts mean a lot to me, and I'd love to hear your perspective. I drove the Hudson like I'd drawn it myself, watching the city shrink in the rear view and grow in my chest. Sophie put her head back and stared at the ceiling of the car as if it were a sky she could bargain with. Do you think he loved her? She asked. I took a breath I didn't want to take. I think he loved the way he felt near her. That's not the same thing. She nodded once, as if filing the sentence under evidence. We didn't speak again until the tires nudged the gravel of the Whitman house. Inside, the place was dark and honest. Houses are loud when you know their sounds. The tick of baseboard heat, the small sigh of a settling stair. I clicked on the kitchen light and the room gave itself back to me. All butcher block and copper pots and the pencil marks on the doorframe where we measured Sophie every birthday. She went upstairs to pack. I stood in the doorway and let the stillness inventory me. What mattered? The Whitman deed, my licenses, the small cedar box with my father's cufflinks and the letter that came with them. The external drive with every drawing I'd made since grad school. The Polaroid of Sophie missing 2 front teeth, smiling so hard you could practically hear the squeak of her laugh. I moved through the rooms in lines. It was almost pleasant, the way purposeful movement can be, like nodding to yourself in a language only your body knows. In our bedroom, Ethan's tuxedo jacket lay like a broken promise on the bench at the foot of the bed. I picked it up, hung it cleanly in the closet, and shut the door. Some lines you don't cross even now. On the dresser, our wedding photograph stood in a frame I'd bought at a flea market in Red Hook. 2 kids at a courthouse. Me in a white dress that cost a week's rent. Ethan in a suit 1 size too big. Both of us holding a bouquet I made from bodega flowers because every dollar mattered then. There was so much want in those faces that I had to set the picture down to stop the room from spinning. Down the hall, a door clicked. Sophie stepped out with her backpack and a camera bag, hair scooped into a fast, crooked bun. She hesitated at the threshold of our family room and then went in, returning with the tattered stuffed fox she'd long ago sworn she didn't sleep with anymore. "I'm allowed to bring him," she said, defiant. "I'd have made you go back for him if you hadn't," I said, and she smiled a little, and I was grateful for the small mercies that keep grief from having the whole house to itself. My phone buzzed. Then I let it tremble against the counter until it stilled. It began again. I turned it face down and it pulsed against the stone like a heart doing too much. Sophie watched me not answer. You're going to call someone though, right? Like, a lawyer. I don't remember telling her about Valerie Stein, but kids who live near the blast radius learn to read blueprints. Yes, I said. Not tonight. But yes. And the bank. Yes. Her shoulders dropped. A plan is a blanket in a cold room. I went to the sunroom where the house keeps its memories in daylight, and opened the cabinet beneath the built-in shelves. The fireproof folder was there where it always was. Deed. Trust. Prenuptial agreement with my initials in the margins and my father's signature on the witness line. Load-bearing lines. Back in the kitchen, I slid the documents into my tote and grabbed the letter from the cufflink box because I needed the weight of my father's voice in my bag. As I zipped it, the phone began to hum again, and this time I picked it up, not to answer but to see. 23 missed calls. 16 texts in a language of we can talk and you're overreacting and please come back and I love you. The one thing about lies is that they always dress in plural. Truth is a single sentence that fits in your mouth and tastes like iron. I'm done. You ready? I asked. Sophie nodded. Are you? I thought of the pendant at Chloe's throat. Of the way Ethan didn't look at me. In a room I'd chosen on a night my friends toasted, under a chandelier I could tell you the manufacturer, the wattage, the exact angle of the drop crystals. I thought of the vow I made to myself at 22, to build a life I would be proud to live inside of. Yes, I said. We stepped onto the porch. The night had been cut into cleaner lines than before. The maple out front moved just enough to make the porch light flicker against the rail. I locked the door and slid the spare key into the flower pot where it always waits for the version of you that forgot her purse. It felt like saying goodbye to a woman I liked but wouldn't be seeing anymore. At the car, Sophie paused. Do you want to tell Aunt Lena? She asked. I mean, she'll see everything online. I'll call her, I said. After I call myself. She made a face. That doesn't make sense. It will, I said, and the words surprised me because they were true. I started the engine, and as the headlights washed over the facade I designed for everyone but us, I realized something simple and devastating and liberating all at once. I could build again. Different site. Better foundation. No one borrowing my load-bearing walls. We pulled onto the road, and for the first time all night, the world felt steadier than the room I left behind. Sophie clipped her seatbelt and stared forward, jaw set. What are you going to do tomorrow? She asked. I pictured the blueprint unrolling in my head. The bank, the lawyer, the documents, the phone calls that would turn a party into paperwork. And just for a second I saw something else. A white sign staked into the earth at the edge of a wraparound porch, letters black and clean against the winter grass. I'm going to start, I said. Outside, the river took the city lights and scattered them like seeds. Somewhere across the water, a quartet was packing their instruments, staff folded chaircloths. A chandelier hummed itself back to sleep. I drove my daughter toward a future that hadn't been drawn yet and felt the simple, solid relief of a line finding the right place on the page. By morning, the house would be quiet, the phone would be relentless, and the first call I made would change the shape of everything. But tonight belonged to exits, to breath, to leaving the room I built for the wrong purposes. And I didn't look back. The morning after, the air in the Whitman house felt different. Not quieter, not heavier, just changed. Like a building whose frame had shifted overnight. You don't always see the damage, but you hear it in the creak of the beams and feel it in the way the floor slants when you walk. I hadn't slept. Sophie had curled into the guest bed with her stuffed fox tucked under her chin, but I lay awake on the couch staring at the ceiling's familiar plaster pattern. The same one I had sketched when we remodeled after my father's death. Last night, those swirling lines had felt like comfort. Now they looked like cracks. By sunrise I knew what I had to do. Not think, not wonder, not ask why. Do. The Whitman house wasn't just any house. My father, Robert Whitman, had built his fortune in real estate development, but this colonial mansion in New Jersey was the one property he never sold. He left it to me outright, deed and trust, with a single sentence written in his hand. Never let a man make you forget the roof you built for yourself. For years I told myself that was just my father being cynical. But standing barefoot in the kitchen that morning, watching the first light slice across the marble island, I realized he hadn't been cynical. He had been practical. He had known. This house wasn't Ethan's. It had never been Ethan's. He lived here by invitation, a tenant in spirit even if the neighbors called us the Coopers of Whitman House. And now his lease was up. At 7:03 a.m., I dialed the number of Monica Sanders, my realtor friend who had once helped me find a loft for a client in Soho. Monica was efficient, discreet, and unflappable, the kind of person who could walk through a burning building and take notes on the floor plan. She answered on the second ring, her voice still gravelly from sleep. "Hannah, everything okay?" "No," I said. "But it will be. I need you to list the Whitman house. Today." Silence hummed across the line. "Are you serious? That house is wine. And it's going on the market. High price fast sale. I don't care about the furniture. Just get it listed." I could hear the shift in her tone as she woke up fully. "All right. I'll draft the listing and get a photographer by noon. But Hannah, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure." The next call was to the bank. Joint accounts frozen. My inheritance accounts moved. Ethan had been signing receipts and authorizing deals for years on money that wasn't really his. I wasn't going to let him treat my future like another one of his emerging market risks. The third call was the most important. Valerie Stein. Divorce attorney. Ruthless, brilliant, with a reputation for burning cheaters so cleanly they barely knew they were ash. When she picked up, her voice was sharp as glass. "Stein. It's Hannah Cooper. I need a divorce." She didn't even sound surprised. "When did you find out?" "Last night. Our anniversary party. He danced with her, in front of everyone. His assistant." "Perfect," she said, her tone cold in a way that made me feel less alone. "We'll use the witnesses. We'll use the video. Do you have assets in your name?" "The house. My inheritance accounts. And I think he's been hiding money." "Then we'll find it. I'll have papers drafted before lunch. Expect my paralegal to call for details." It was like hiring a demolition team for a building I'd once loved. The wrecking ball had already swung. Now I was just making sure the fall was controlled. By mid-morning, Sophie came down the stairs in sweatpants, her hair still tangled from sleep. She looked at the half-packed boxes in the kitchen, then at me on the phone with Monica, rattling off square footage and bedroom counts. "Mom, what's happening?" I put the phone on speaker so I could meet her eyes. "We're leaving this house, Sophie. We're not waiting around for your father to come back and pretend this didn't happen." She sank onto a stool, arms wrapped around her knees. "So that's it? 20 years and it's just over?" The question broke something in me because it wasn't her job to carry that weight. But she was old enough to deserve the truth. "No," I said softly. "It wasn't over last night. It's been over for months. Last night was just when he decided to show everyone." She nodded slowly like she already knew. "Kids always know." "What do we do now?" she asked. "We pack what matters. Clothes, photos, things we can't replace. Everything else, let it go." She hesitated. "Do you think Dad will fight you?" "Yes," I admitted. "But he'll lose." For a moment she was quiet, chewing at her thumbnail. Then she said, "Good." Around noon, Sophie burst into the study where I was boxing up files. Her phone was glowing in her hand. "Mom, you have to see this." On screen, a shaky video showed the exact moment my hand met Chloe's face, the crack of it echoing through the ballroom. Someone had uploaded it to Instagram with the caption, "Architect wife slaps mistress at anniversary party #Queen Energy #justice served." Views, 20,000. Comments, endless. Finally a woman who doesn't just cry in the bathroom. She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. Imagine embarrassing your wife in front of 200 people and then getting slapped in 4K. I covered my mouth, half horrified, half relieved. "Mom, you're trending." Sophie was grinning for the first time in days. "You're literally a meme." I should have been embarrassed. Instead, I felt the smallest surge of power. The world knew. I wasn't invisible anymore. At 3 p.m., the sound of tires on gravel snapped my head up. Sophie ran to the window. "It's him." Ethan's sleek black Tesla pulled into the drive like it still belonged here. He climbed out in his crumpled tuxedo shirt, looking less like a Wall Street king and more like a man who had misplaced his empire overnight. He stood at the door and pounded once, twice. "Hannah, we need to talk." I didn't move. Sophie's hand slipped into mine, her fingers trembling but determined. Through the heavy oak door his voice cracked. Please, Han. It was just one dance. Don't do this. Just one dance. As if a 20-year betrayal could be minimized to a few minutes of music. I almost laughed. Instead, I pulled Sophie toward the back stairs. Come on, I whispered. We've got better places to be. We walked out the side door, leaving Ethan alone at the front, knocking on a house that was no longer his. And as I slid the car key into the ignition, the only thought in my head was my father's words. Don't ever let anyone build over your load-bearing walls. It was time to rebuild. If the night of the anniversary party was the collapse, the next days were the aftershocks. Every hour brought a new crack in the life Ethan had tried so carefully to polish for public view. And every hour I learned how to stop patching those cracks and start letting the building fall. By Monday morning, Valerie Stein had already drawn up the first papers. I met her in her downtown office, all glass walls and clean lines, a space that felt more like a command center than a law firm. She pushed a folder across the table to me. Petition for divorce. Grounds: adultery, emotional neglect, and misuse of marital funds. We'll also request immediate injunction to freeze any undisclosed assets. Her voice was as flat as blueprint paper, but her eyes burned. Hannah, your case is a gift. Public humiliation, underage child witness, property in your name, financial trail that points to him funneling your money into his company. Any judge with a conscience will hand you custody and majority assets. What if Ethan fights it? I asked. She almost smiled. He can fight. He'll bleed out faster. That was Valerie. Sharp edges in a tailored suit, someone who treated betrayal like a structural defect to be corrected with surgical demolition. The next call was with Daniel Harlow, a forensic accountant with the patience of a surgeon and the instincts of a detective. He wore glasses too big for his face and carried a laptop like it was a scalpel. Your husband's financial patterns are sloppy, Daniel said, scrolling through spreadsheets of Ethan's firm. Late-night transfers. Withdrawals from shell accounts registered under names that tie back to his assistant. The man isn't even subtle. He thought I wouldn't notice, I murmured. Daniel adjusted his glasses. That's the mistake men like him always make. They think loyalty equals blindness. He promised to trace everything. Shell corporations, crypto wallets, even the offshore account Ethan thought was invisible. Give me a week, he said. I'll find the whole skeleton. Meanwhile, the video of me slapping Chloe had gone from 20,000 views to 500,000. Morning talk shows dissected it like it was foreign policy. Memes popped up everywhere. A cartoon of me in an architect's hard hat with the caption, "Demolition, Hannah style." A gif of the slap on repeat, tagged #blueprint for revenge. Tweets comparing Chloe's red cheek to a failed building inspection. Sophie scrolled through them at breakfast, her grin fierce. Mom, you're officially a legend. They call you the patron saint of fed-up wives. I should have been embarrassed. But after 20 years of invisibility, it felt like oxygen. Of course, Ethan tried to salvage his narrative. On Tuesday, he went on a financial podcast, his voice honeyed with rehearsed regret. It was a misunderstanding, he told the host. A dance blown out of proportion by social media. My wife is emotional, understandably so, but our family should not be defined by one night. One night. He kept saying that, like betrayal could be shrunk down to 4 minutes of music. The comment section shredded him. Sir, your one night was caught in 4K from 6 different angles. This man really said, oops, my mistress slipped. Protect Hannah at all costs. His attempt at spin only accelerated his free fall. By midweek, Chloe was out of a job. Her company released a statement about professional misconduct, but the leaked HR memo told the real story. Inappropriate relationship with a superior, breach of trust, reputational damage. Sophie read the news aloud at the kitchen table and smirked. Guess Dad's promotion plan for her didn't work out. She traded a paycheck for a scandal, I said. That's not a promotion. That's demolition. Then came the call I hadn't expected. Charles Cooper, Ethan's father. Once a respected state senator, Charles carried himself like a man who still believed the family name had weight. Hannah. His voice thundered through the phone. I raised Ethan better than this. What he's done, disgraceful. I want you to know you and Sophie will always have my support. I braced myself. Charles, he's your son. He was my son, Charles corrected. Now he's a liability. Effective immediately, I've removed him from all trust distributions. His shares in the Cooper estate will bypass him and go directly to Sophie's education fund. That girl deserves a future not tainted by his foolishness. For the first time in years, I believed him. That Friday, Ethan showed up outside Sophie's school, leaning against his Tesla like a ghost of his former self. I arrived just as Sophie spotted him. She froze, her face pale but determined. "Sweetheart," Ethan said, forcing a smile. "Let's talk." She folded her arms. "Talk to Mom's lawyer." His smile collapsed. He turned to me, desperation leaking into his posture. "Hannah, please. You can't cut me out. This is still my family." I met his eyes, steady. "No, Ethan. This was your family. Now it's mine to protect." The look on his face, half shock, half the realization that his old tools no longer worked, was the closest thing to justice I had seen yet. That night, back at the Whitman house, I spread Valerie's documents across the kitchen island like blueprints. Sophie sat beside me, sketching in her notebook, her pencil lines confident. "What are you drawing?" I asked. "A bridge," she said without looking up. "For us. To get away from him." And for the first time I realized, we weren't just dismantling a broken structure. We were already building something new. It was a Thursday evening when Sophie and I sat in the Whitman house living room, cartons of takeout spread across the coffee table. She was half watching a Netflix series when the local news interrupted with a special report. I didn't need to see the headline. The photo on screen, Ethan in his navy suit, chin lowered, eyes carefully damp, was enough. "Tonight," the anchor said, "we bring you an exclusive interview with financial advisor Ethan Cooper, the man at the center of last week's viral anniversary scandal." Sophie muted the TV and stared at me. "He wouldn't." "Oh, he would," I said, settling back. "And he did." Ethan looked directly into the camera, his voice warm and rehearsed. "It was just one dance. My wife misunderstood. Social media turned it into something it wasn't. I love Hannah. I love our daughter. This has gone too far." I felt Sophie's fingers tighten around the couch cushion. "Your wife struck your colleague on camera," the anchor pressed. Ethan gave a saintly nod. "She's emotional. Understandably so. But she's manipulating Sophie, turning her against me. I never wanted this family torn apart." The words landed like stones. He was painting himself as the victim. He was painting me as unhinged. Sophie's face flushed with fury. "He's lying, Mom. Everyone saw." "Wait," I told her, because I knew what was coming. Truth has a way of finding daylight. Within hours, the internet had its rebuttal. An anonymous account dropped a link to security footage from Ethan's office building. Grainy but unmistakable, it showed Ethan and Chloe pressed against the wall of the parking garage, Chloe smoothing her skirt, Ethan glancing around like a teenager sneaking out. Timestamp: 8 months earlier. Another clip followed. An elevator, hands where they shouldn't be. Another. Conference room, blinds drawn. All of it catalogued, all of it damning. The hashtags shifted instantly. Hashtag gaslighting, hashtag receipts, hashtag justice for Hannah. Comment sections were merciless. "This man tried to gaslight his wife and an entire nation. We've got video, sir. Imagine cheating and being this bad at lying. Hannah deserves a medal in architecture and demolition." The lie had collapsed under its own weight. By Friday morning, Chloe was gone. Rumor said she'd been escorted from the investment firm by security, her belongings in a box, mascara streaked across her face. A leaked HR memo labeled her conduct unprofessional and disruptive to workplace harmony. Sophie showed me the clip of her storming out, captured by a bystander on their phone. Chloe's voice cracked as she screamed. "He said he'd leave her for me." The internet pounced. "Girl, he can't even keep his Tesla lease. What did you think? Never trust a man who lies with that much confidence on camera." That same afternoon my phone rang. Caller ID, Charles Cooper. Ethan's father. "Hannah," his voice rumbled. "I saw the footage. I saw the interview. My son has disgraced this family." I braced. "Charles, you don't have to." "I do." Effective immediately, Ethan is cut off from the Cooper Trust. His shares are being reassigned. Sophie will inherit what he's thrown away. I closed my eyes, stunned. "Charles, that's..." Justice, he interrupted. You've been more of a Cooper than Ethan ever was. You supported him, raised Sophie, kept the family name steady. I won't let him drag you down with him. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then I managed. Thank you. Don't thank me. Build something better. Show Sophie what strength looks like. 2 nights later, Ethan showed up at a downtown restaurant where Sophie and I were having dinner. Cameras flashed instantly. Strangers recognized us from the viral videos. He walked to our table, Chloe absent, his suit wrinkled. Hannah, Sophie, he began, his voice thin. Please, let's talk. Sophie's jaw tightened. Why did you bring her into our lives, Dad? Why did you let her ruin everything? Ethan's face crumpled. It wasn't like that. Chloe didn't mean. Chloe already left you, Sophie snapped. She pulled out her phone and showed him the screenshot. Chloe's Instagram story from the night before. Single and ready to mingle #new chapter. The color drained from his face. He turned to me like a drowning man reaching for a rope. Hannah, we can fix this. Counseling, anything. Please. I stood, napkins sliding from my lap. Ethan, you spent 8 months burning our foundation. There's nothing left to fix. He grabbed my wrist, desperate. What am I supposed to tell people? I looked him straight in the eye, aware of the cameras recording every word. Tell them the truth. Tell them you traded 20 years for 20 minutes. Applause rose from nearby tables, scattered but fierce. Someone shouted, Go Hannah. Ethan sat back down hollow as Sophie and I walked out into the night. Later, in the quiet of the Whitman house, I spread Daniel's latest report across the kitchen island. More hidden accounts. More proof. Ethan's empire was unraveling thread by thread. Sophie leaned against the counter watching me. Mom, she said softly, I think he's already lost everything. Not yet, I answered, signing the latest document Valerie had prepared. But he will. And for the first time I felt the storm breaking, not over me but around him. 2 weeks after the anniversary fiasco, Sophie and I walked into a glass-walled apartment overlooking the Hudson. The place smelled faintly of paint and new beginnings. White walls. Hardwood floors. A balcony that caught the evening light like a stage. It feels clean, Sophie whispered, dropping her backpack by the kitchen island. Like nothing bad ever happened here. He was right. The Whitman house had been beautiful, but its walls had memorized too many lies. This apartment, though, it was a blank sheet of paper. And I was an architect. Blank paper was my element. I signed the lease that afternoon. When we returned with our boxes, Sophie pressed her palm against the cool glass of her new bedroom window and grinned. This is ours. Not his. Days found their rhythm. Mornings began with coffee on the balcony, watching the city stretch awake. Sophie rode the subway to her new school, her debate team already recruiting her after hearing her sharp tongue in action. Evenings we cooked together. Pasta one night, tacos another. Laughing when we burned the tortillas because neither of us knew how to use the new stove. I started sketching again, filling page after page with designs that had nothing to do with Ethan's career or clients. Bridges, galleries, community centers. My hand was steady in ways it hadn't been for years. The sale of the Whitman house closed faster than anyone expected. The bidding war Monica orchestrated ended with an offer nearly double its value, from a corporate buyer who wanted a weekend retreat. When the wire transfer cleared, Valerie called me. You're liquid, Hannah. Very liquid. What's the plan? The old Hannah would have deferred to Ethan, let him talk about portfolios and emerging markets. But that woman was gone. I met with a financial advisor recommended by my father's old colleagues. We bought into real estate trusts, blue-chip stocks, and a commercial property on the edge of Brooklyn that I could turn into studio space. For the first time, my money wasn't someone else's tool. It was my foundation. Sophie teased me when I said it. You sound like an investor now. Maybe, I admitted, but at least I'm investing in us. Meanwhile, Ethan's empire was burning. Daniel's reports kept coming. Offshore accounts exposed, hidden crypto wallets frozen, evidence of fraud stacked higher than his stock portfolio ever had. The firm suspended him pending investigation. Clients walked. Deals dissolved. His name, once gold in Manhattan boardrooms, was now whispered like a warning. One evening, Sophie scrolled through her phone at dinner and smirked. Mom, he's selling his Tesla. I arched an eyebrow. For cash. Apparently. He posted it on Facebook Marketplace. She read the listing aloud, snorting. Low miles. Excellent condition. Motivated seller. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd that the man who once insisted on valet parking everywhere now had to haggle with strangers online. As Ethan spiraled, invitations landed in my inbox. Women's organizations wanted me to speak about resilience. Universities wanted lectures on rebuilding after betrayal. A TEDx curator emailed saying my story was the blueprint for survival in the modern age. I hesitated. Part of me wanted anonymity. But Sophie pushed me. Mom, you're already a meme, she said, rolling her eyes. You might as well be a role model too. So I accepted. My first talk was at a women's shelter in Queens. I stood at a podium in a simple black dress and told my story. Not the slap, not the viral video, but the long years of compromise, of silence, of disappearing piece by piece. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then a woman in the back stood and clapped. Another followed. Soon the whole shelter was on its feet. Not for the scandal. For the survival. I cried that night, but it was the good kind. The kind that builds instead of breaks. Sophie was thriving too. She won her first debate meet with an argument so sharp the judge quoted her in his notes. She came home flushed with victory, waving her medal. I told them, she said proudly, that truth is the strongest structure. Lies collapse under their own weight. I hugged her so tightly she groaned. My daughter, my fiercest ally. She had seen me broken and chosen to stand taller beside me. But even as we rebuilt, Ethan still circled the ruins. He called from unknown numbers, left voicemails that swung between rage and begging. One night he turned up outside our new building, suit wrinkled, eyes red. He shouted up from the sidewalk, "Hannah, please. We can fix this." I pulled Sophie back from the window. "Ignore him," I whispered. "Do you ever feel sorry for him?" she asked. I thought of the years I spent covering for his late nights, the smell of cologne I hadn't bought, the way he looked at Chloe like I was invisible. "No," I said. "Not anymore." That evening, as the city lights flickered across the river, I spread my sketches on the balcony floor. Sophie sat cross-legged beside me, sipping hot chocolate. "What are you drawing now?" she asked. "A home," I said. "But not a house. A home." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in months, I felt the kind of peace you can't buy, can't fake, can't beg for. The kind you build. Ethan had lost everything he thought mattered. And I had finally found what really did. A year is both a lifetime and a heartbeat. 12 months ago, I was standing in a ballroom, watching my husband dance with his mistress under a chandelier I'd chosen to celebrate 2 decades of marriage. Tonight, I was standing on the balcony of a home I paid for with my own money, watching the city lights flicker like they were winking at me. What began as journal entries turned into a blog. The blog turned into essays. And the essays turned into a book. Blueprints After Betrayal. Rebuilding When Love Lies hit shelves 6 weeks ago. The first print sold out in days. Readers wrote to me from Chicago, from London, from small towns I'd never heard of, telling me they'd left marriages that were crumbling, careers that had hollowed them out, lives that no longer felt like their own. I never set out to be an author. I set out to survive. But sometimes survival becomes a map and other people find their way with it. Sophie was thriving too. She'd been elected student body president at her new school and captain of the debate team. Colleges were already circling, sending letters with crests and promises. One evening, after a meet she dominated with arguments sharp enough to draw standing applause, she collapsed onto the couch, grinning. "I told them," she said breathless, "that truth doesn't ask permission. It just stands." She didn't get that from Ethan. She got it from the women who raised her. My mother, her grandmother, and finally me when I remembered who I was. On the first anniversary of the night that changed everything, Sophie had an idea. "Mom, we should celebrate. Not the slap. Not the scandal. Our freedom." So we did. Small and intimate. My book club friends, Monica the realtor, Daniel the accountant, Valerie who had fought like a warrior in court, and even Charles Cooper, my former father-in-law, who arrived with a bouquet of white roses and tears he didn't bother hiding. "To Hannah and Sophie," he said, raising his glass. "The true strength of this family." There were no chandeliers, no string quartets. Just good food, cheap wine, and laughter that didn't have to compete with secrets. Of course, shadows linger. Ethan had moved to California months earlier, grasping for new firms, new starts, new chances. But nothing stuck. Valerie's team had seen to that. The alimony and child support judgments bound him tighter than any contract ever had. Bankruptcy filings failed. His name was toxic in financial circles. Occasionally, a letter slipped through, please, scrawled in handwriting that once signed mortgage papers and Valentine's cards alike. I'm sorry. I've changed. Please forgive me. I never replied. Sophie didn't want me to. Mom, she said once, holding a letter over the trash can. He made his choice. Let him live with it. So we did. With the proceeds from the house sale and the recovered funds Daniel tracked, I invested in properties of my own. A brownstone in Brooklyn I rented to young artists. A small commercial building that now held a dance studio, a bakery, and my own design office. Every blueprint I drew had my name on it, not hidden in the margins of someone else's career. I wasn't building for Ethan anymore. I was building for us. As the last guests left the party that night, Sophie and I stood on our balcony, paper lanterns flickering behind us. The city stretched endless before us, lights like constellations we got to name. Do you ever miss him? Sophie asked quietly. I thought of Ethan's laugh in the early years, the way he once held her as a baby, the man I believed he was. Then I thought of the lies, the arrogance, the way he had looked at Chloe like I was nothing. I miss who I thought he was, I said. But that man never really existed. Sophie leaned her head on my shoulder. Good. Because we're better without him. And she was right. 1 year after everything burned, we weren't just standing, we were soaring. Stronger. Sharper. Freer. The past was rubble, but we had drawn new blueprints, laid new foundations, and built a life that no one could take from us again. The storm had passed. The house was gone. But the home, we had rebuilt it. And it was indestructible.